we're going to be looking at the power of the 5-second pause in conversations. And this is an interesting subject.
Okay, so the power of the 5-second pause. Set it up for me. What's the concept? What's the context, not the concept. What's the context?
Context is this. We've all had that experience where we get into a conversation with someone, and maybe because of old discussion points, old arguments, whatever, things can go off the rails. People start bringing up other stuff. They know what our buttons are, know how to push them. Now, I'm not going to say that this happens particularly with family members through marriage. I'd never say that. But interestingly, there's ways of defeating this so you can keep a conversation on the rails with neither of you getting angry, neither of you getting stressed out, and deal with actual information instead of stupid emotions.
Okay, so you're talking about situations where two people are having a conversation. It may be leading towards argumentation and heated emotions and things like that.
Right.
And so this idea of the 5-second pause is going to stop that from happening and make the conversation more productive.
Correct. Now, let's say when we say argumentation, we don't mean in the classical sense of trying to get to the truth through argumentation, which is legitimate. But bringing in the emotions is what he said. And that's really key here. Emotions tend to throw gasoline on a fire. And you know what happens. You get in a discussion with someone and their feelings are hurt, and then you try to correct yourself. Before long, you're on the defensive and people are mad at each other. And it doesn't have to be just groups of two people.
That's true.
It could be a larger group.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it could be... Actually, here we are recording this over the holidays with my Christmas mug. It could be a family dinner on Christmas Day.
It often is.
How often do family dinners maybe turn into, not in my family, but I hear stories about this kind of stuff all the time.
I can tell you something.
Oh, they were just attacking me and everyone was ganging up on me. And
totally.
That can lead to...
Crazy discussions where nothing gets dealt with. This happened to me 2 Christmases ago, and I'm not making this up. I won't go into the details. But the point is, when people start to bring in too much emotion into a discussion, Human Givens theory, Griffin and Tyrrell, Cambridge, England psychologists, they say emotion makes us stupider. And that's true. Any overwhelming emotion, even joy, even if you're really super happy, emotions can make you stupider. So that means we don't even argue and discuss things logically when we're in a high emotional state.
Okay, this is a point worth touching on briefly before we move on.
That's why I wrote it down.
Emotions make you stupider. That doesn't mean that you're actually becoming permanently stupider.
Permanently?
It's a temporary effect, right? So we have a level of intellect or a level of ability to use logic and think.
To think rationally,
and when emotions come into play, when the emotions are, and it can be good emotions or bad emotions.
Either way.
Right? It can be, tell your example of,
the girl,
let's say, I'm young and in love. And
well, the 6-month honeymoon, people fall in love. They've got oxytocin firing every time they look at each other in the eyes. They think the other person's perfect. We minimize their weaknesses and build up their strengths. It's the father saying to his 22-year-old daughter, but your boyfriend, he was 10 years in prison. He's a serial killer. And she said, I know, Dad, but he brought me some strawberries from the market today, and it was just so thoughtful.
Yeah,
that's what happens.
These are the
emotions make us stupider.
Right. This is what we're talking about. The emotions, whether they are good or bad, it doesn't matter. They're powerful. The more powerful the emotion, the more it draws us away
from our intellect.
From intellect and logic.
Yes.
And so we're thinking with our heart instead of with our brain, or
thinking goes offline.
Okay,
definitely.
So emotions in the context of an argument or an argument that's starting to form will not help you get to a resolution.
No, it won't, because emotions, it starts to ramp up very, very quickly.
Right.
It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. It doesn't put it out. It makes it worse.
Okay.
So here's where the 5-second pause comes in. And this is remarkably powerful. I just read this in an Apple News story a while ago and saved the story, but I can't remember the source. But the ubiquitous they have discovered, if you're in any kind of discussion like this, or in your marriage, in your relationships, in your friendships, and it starts to get a bit off the rails, all you do is every time they make a point, mentally, slowly count to 5 before you answer. But don't do it like staring like, Dave Deck, like you're stunned or something, or looking at your watch. You want to just internally go 1,000, 2,000, or use the old Kodak one that developing film.
You can offer
Kodak
something
1,
for
Kodak
the
2.
other person to calibrate too, right?
Yeah, so you're
for
looking,
example,
nodding.
So you're saying something and I'm catching myself about to, and I'm about, I want to reach out and
touch somebody. Yeah.
No, so I can just listen and go,
Or you can even listen with the steepling. Now, not steepling up, steepling pointed down. That shows that you're receptive to the other person. You're nodding, you're listening, you're counting to 5 in your head.
Your body language is indicating that you're processing rather than
not giving
ignoring.
a talk. Yes.
Yeah, you don't want to come across as Mr. I'm ignoring you.
And the beauty of this is I've done this a few times. It is so powerful. What it does is that 5-second pause enables you to think, but it stops you reacting. Reacting is when the words hit a nerve, something we say, oh, why are you bringing that up again? And before long, you're both going up in volume, and then you're off the rails right away. You have to return to rationality as quickly as possible. Well, a 5-second pause will keep you there. It stops the adrenaline, and you can just consider what they're saying and respond quietly. The key is never interrupt.
Yeah,
which is hard
That's
for me.
actually, no, I almost interrupted you, but I noticed that was the end of your sentence.
Well done.
So that's kind of the last 2 bullet points we have here are about interrupting, because when you do interrupt someone, it makes it leads them to feel internally they're not being heard, they're not being valued. So that 5-second pause, not only does it stop that whole we actually didn't go through the levels of data. We should explain that real quick,
sure.
too, but that it stops you from going from what we'll call level, are we calling them level 0, 1, and 2, or 1, 2, or 3?
1, 2, and 3.
Okay,
so 1 is just data.
Level 1 is just data. So we're having an information-based discussion. So we could be having a conversation, and it could be something like anything to do with just data, just information.
What do you think of that new Tesla Cybertruck?
Right,
Wow.
I happen to be data is, I'm a fan of the Cybertruck and you're not a fan, or whatever.
I like it.
A data could be, even in politics is a horrible one, right? But if somebody said, I really like Donald Trump, or I really like Joe Biden, or whatever the case may
Justin
be.
Trudeau.
That's data without emotion, right?
Sure.
So
I like lobster.
Which very rarely is the case. People will very rarely sit across on the table talking about politics or religion or anything like that and be just that data. But it's theoretically possible.
Right. And because it's some of these topics people are passionate about, it's natural to warm up the emotions a bit. And a bit of emotion can add to a discussion. It can make it funnier and more interesting.
Right.
But once you get to level 3, you're now drenched with adrenaline.
Right.
Rationality disappears. People start shouting at each other. They stop listening to each other. And that's one of the powers of the 5-second pause. It lets you take time to listen before you respond.
So you're
and now, amazingly, when I've started doing this, stuff that would normally hit my buttons, like, why is that coming up again? I pause and I go, okay, that's being brought up again. I just put that aside and then answer. It is incredible. And here's one of the things I love about it. The study said there is no advantage, even though the 5-second pause works amazingly well, there's no advantage to pausing longer, 10, 15 seconds. It makes no difference.
It becomes awkward at that point. I think I've mentioned in the past on our podcast that I used to have a boss, and he was the king of awkward silence, and I hated it, right? So he's Mike's doing it right now.
Scary thing is giving you an awkward silence. Brilliant.
Yeah, so there's the idea of if we use the 5-second pause, it'll cause us to be less interruptive, which will not only not ramp up those emotions, will help keep us at level 1 or level 2. Level 2 is fine.
2's all right.
2's fine. It's sort of
it's
like,
halfway to 3.
Why are you a fan of such and such a political character? Well, make a little joke, make a comment. Well, I really don't like that guy, and you're showing a bit of emotion, but you're not going nuts. And then level 3 is the nuclear weapons.
That's right.
You do not want to push the launch button. So not interrupting
Definitely
and giving
not.
the 5-second pause will stop that from happening.
Let's talk about the nuclear weapons here too, because in any close relationship, over time, we learn the things that will set the other person off.
Right.
And, the old arguments, my friend's parents used to bring that up all the time. My friend Brian, who you know, when he'd be in grade 6, he broke his glasses or something. He was in trouble. He broke them again, and it was expensive to get them fixed. And he said his parents would invariably say, "Oh, what was that stupid thing you did last week?" And he's like, and then they revisit all of that again.
Firing out.
That's nuclear weapons. That's bringing in stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know what your buttons are. And the 5-second pause stops you being reactive. And also, the 5-second pause has another benefit here. One of the dangers is if we think quickly, if we're rapid thinkers, as I am, there's a tendency to want to interrupt. And we're already building up our argument inside our own head.
Yeah.
We're not listening anymore. We're preparing our response. We're
You're not
planning.
listening, you're planning.
But the 5-second pause deals with that too.
Yeah.
It just brings everything down. And if you don't do it, you'll get more of what you don't want. You'll get more anger, more stress, more people walking off into other rooms and not talking for half an hour.
Right. You amplify. We wrote it down as amplify the opposite. You do not want to amplify the opposite. So if you want healing and agreement and resolution, and you interrupt and you get emotions ramped up, you're amplifying the opposite of what you want. Hence,
Right.
the 5-second pause really helps. I think that's a great way to end it here. That's a fantastic. You're doing a 5-second.
I agree.
All right.
Excellent.
Thanks, everybody.
I hope this works for you.
We hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks again, and
Good night.
5-second pause.